to Trailer Rewind, a monthly conversation about movies you may have missed in theaters that are now available to watch at home on streaming services. Every month, we dig into the archives and watch a film that was one of the trailer picks on a Saturday matinee episode. You can get access to the SatMat shows over at patreon.com/thenextreel. It's a great way to get an overview of everything that we do here at The Next Reel. Today, we're talking about The Vanishing of Sidney Hall. This was Pete's pick from January 13, 2018. Today is April 10th, 2019, and The Vanishing of Sidney Hall is available on Amazon Prime and Canopy. When we talked about this as a trailer pick, Andy mentioned that the film had played Sundance back in 2017, but this was the first time the trailer dropped. It actually had a very limited release on March 2nd, 2018. It looks like, as far as I can tell, it was only on about 10 screens.
Total?
I could not find any box office information at all anywhere. And I think that maybe it also appeared to have a March 2nd release on Amazon Prime and iTunes. And then later that month, March 20th, it appears that that's when it hit DVD and Blu-ray. So this was sort of like a day and date release in theaters and streaming at the same time.
Wow.
The fact that Andy said, it had played Sundance the year before and there was really nothing as far as trailers. And then it got picked up as an A24 release, but then it just sort of, came and went. It just looked like it got pushed out into streaming.
Yeah.
Pete said he picked this because it's full of people that he really, really likes, and he also has a thing for stories about authors, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Andy said it looked like a tricky drama with some mystery and a strong character that looks to be the strength of the story, and that this is the type of film that you hope lives up to what it is setting up. And perhaps we can talk about that as well. This is an A24 release, he mentioned, and we have a sort of high bar of expectations for films with A24. These trailers get priority on the SatMat. If somebody brings an A24 trailer, that goes first because we're always excited to see what A24 is bringing to us. Previously on the show, we've talked about several A24 films. I think recently we just had Lean on Pete was an A24 film. So, opening statements here, JJ. What did you think about this one?
So this was an interesting movie. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about it even leading up to seeing it, and I just watched it Monday night. I actually had a conversation with Tommy Handsome, our wonderful additional host from the film board, and we looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes. That was my my experience with knowing about this movie.
Okay.
And the tomato meter, and I think that's critics, right? No, tomato meter is kind of everybody. It gave it a 12%. A 12% out of the 100, and that's not, and then, and Tommy looked up Metacritic as well, and that gave it, I think, 18. So I knew nothing coming into this movie. I just knew that it was a drama, and like Pete said in his recommendation here, this is a really spectacular cast. You get slapped in the face with some amazing faces the whole way you go through this movie. I really, really liked it. I thought I am a sucker for nonlinear storytelling. I don't know that I would say that the execution was perfect. I think that there's lots of people could quibble with lots of things in this movie, but the story is adventurous. It's they're really trying to tell something that's complicated, complex, and I think they do it well. I think it's an emotional movie, and I think it's an emotional mystery in the way that it's told. I really liked it a lot, and I don't understand why it's got nothing. Meaning, 10 screens and nobody paying attention to it. This is a perfect movie for Trailer Rewind because it's a movie that if you like drama, you should watch this movie.
There's a scene in this film where our main character, Sidney Hall, has written a novel, and there's a scene where he's talking with his teacher from school about this.
Sure.
Sidney's asking, what he thought, and his teacher's response was, "Well, I felt manipulated."
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I felt about this movie. It's just it manipulated me so much. It frustrated me. I want to love this movie, but I feel like it would have been a better novel than a movie. it's not adapted from a young adult novel, but it feels so much like it is. The structure of the film, where you have multiple storylines, sort of, we've got nonlinear, as you said, and so we're jumping between the timeline in Sidney's life, and we're getting these climactic moments. But I felt that the only reason that was done that way was, if you had gotten it was creating artificial suspense.
Yeah.
To a certain sense. And I felt manipulated. Like, if we don't save that for the end, if we reveal that earlier on, is the story going to lose momentum? Is it going to undermine the power of the narrative? And so I felt I really struggled with this movie and some of the decisions that were made. I also struggle with when you have a character that's supposed to be like the greatest writer of his generation, this just amazing writer. You're setting yourself up with, well, you clearly either have to have some amazing writing, reveal that, or it is all hidden because nothing can live up to the expectation that you're setting for the audience. It's better to just have, it's this great novel. You're going to get some key story points, but we're not going to reveal anything about his writing style or anything, because we can't. As writers of this movie, can't create writing at that level.
So I want to address both your points.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting that you bring up the point where his teacher says he felt manipulated when he read his writing, because this is a manipulative movie. It's meant to do that to you. But similar to what the teacher says, that's how he starts it, right? He felt manipulated. And then he gives a glowing review of what was written by the author. And I think that the depth of this movie, for me, really connected in that way. I think it's interesting that you bring up the concept of us needing to believe in the ability of this character to write as well as he's renowned in the story, because I actually think that the story in and of itself is a deconstruction of this Sidney Hall's character ability to write. That we are, around every turn, he really only writes 2 novels over the course of his life. That's what and
the second one isn't really a novel, as he
exactly.
says. It's just a bunch of unfinished sentences.
Yes, they're brought out. And
about it, yes.
When you go through the story, when the story actually unravels to the end, you learn along the way that he didn't have the idea for the book. It's something that was fed to him. It's based on something that's very tragic and very secret that happened in his life and that he was faced with directly. And so when you think about it, you see the tragedy that unfolds this person and everything that he has to deal with. And the words that the author created were created by muses. They weren't actually created by Sidney. And I think his choice to become a recluse and to, and deal with his mental illness, which is something that's really kind of difficult throughout the story as well, in the way that he does, is also a reaction to his overwhelming guilt about everything, including his renowned or supposed ability that he really doesn't deserve the credit for necessarily. He's just the vessel to explain all these terrible things. And I think so for me, I didn't want them to explain it, because I think that the statement about it is that it's not the person that's the artist in this. It's the tragedy that's the person. And I just thought it was really special. But I can definitely see how you would feel manipulated, and that some of it probably was done to excess.
Well, coming back to his writing, I mean, he's set up early on that he's a great writer. So yes, the subject matter of his novel isn't anything of his own invention. He's drawing from his true life experience. I mean, write what you know. Right at the beginning, it opens with him reading aloud something he's written to class, which we learned was supposed to be, something about the meaning of life. And it's his commentary on who growing up, or masturbation.
It was commentary on masturbation. There was nothing. Yeah, anything else
exactly.
is yeah.
And so we have then a scene right after that where he's meeting with the other teacher, and he's saying, "Look, you're a great writer. You just you pick controversial subject matter, and it's this teacher's got it out for you, and you write for the school newspaper, and I can't publish half the things you write." So we're set up that Sidney is a talented writer. Sure. Early on, this prodigy, and then we're going to learn through the story what he ends up writing, because then we're quickly then introduced to Kyle Chandler, the searcher who's
Right.
looking for this mysterious man that's going into bookstores and burning these books, and he suspects that it's Sidney Hall, who's this reclusive writer who's now just trying to remove his own writing from the world for whatever reason. And I guess
because he hates it.
Yes, but he
feels like an imposter.
Yes,
I don't know. Sorry, I'm going back to that point. We don't need to belabor it, but yeah.
But it's I guess it's such the easy trope to do with, you're either going to be, J.D. Salinger or Thomas Pynchon. You're going to have this reclusive writer, and I think we're probably getting into more Salinger territory. Is this young writer, and young people are really drawn to this book, and it's to destructive ends, and it's this whole look at suburban life, and so it's clearly that's, to me, something you can't get away from, and that makes it really tricky for me, because it's just, I don't know. I guess it's the cliche of the reclusive writer who now is turning his back on his work, that, the world doesn't understand him, or he doesn't like the way the world's responding to his work. Or in this case, it's perhaps this unresolved guilt over this issue, because he's starting to see,
right,
people that aren't there. And we learn that these are people from his youth.
Yes.
So it's setting up a lot of questions at the beginning, like, what is this book that he's going to write? His trajectory of fame, we have that. Then we see that he's a recluse. So what was the transition from famous writer, best-selling book, to being a recluse and, not having and wanting to destroy his book? So it sets up multiple questions at the beginning. And I like that structure, but I think it would work best in a book. Here, as I said, I feel we're being manipulated with these questions, and that's what's going to pull us through the story, to wait for the answers to the questions. There's not enough in character and plot going along to really draw us through, other than I'm watching to see how these questions get answered. That's how I felt.
Yeah,
about this.
It's the mystery for sure.
Yeah,
and I get what you're saying about tropes, but the argument that I would make there is that stereotypes exist for reasons. Yes, there's a reason things become cliche, because they're themes that are successful or that are relatable in art. I think, if you talk about the searcher and that mystery of who the searcher is, and the mystery of how he became a recluse, and all of the different pieces that are in here, that's what you're there for, is to answer those questions. And for me, they were all questions that I was interested to answer, for sure.
Were you satisfied with the answers?
Satisfaction is an interesting question, especially when you relate to a story like this. We bring up Lean on Pete. Lean on Pete's definitely a different story structure. Lean on Pete felt like it was a roller coaster car that was kind of off the rails, and it made me uncomfortable. This felt like it was the opposite. It felt like it was curated. It was a ride that was curated, and I felt like it was wrapped up appropriately. In terms of satisfaction, emotionally, it was disastrous to get to the end of this. It was tragic as well, but I was satisfied in that I thought it was well written and curated in the way that I like in movies. How about you? It sounds like it wasn't satisfying.
No, like I said, I felt manipulated, and this is one of those projects where I feel like writer-director is too closely attached to his material. So this screenplay was written. There's a whole story about, the writer-director of this, Sean Christensen, is a musician. He's one of these, multi-hyphenates. He's a writer, director, actor, musician.
He's a Renaissance man.
Yes, exactly. So I guess this was the script that he had worked on and was acquired by Scott Free Productions back in 2008. That's Ridley Scott. And according to Wikipedia, Joe Russo was going to direct.
Oh, wow.
Ridley Scott and Tony Scott were going to be producers, and Jim Sturgis was going to play Sidney Hall.
Love that.
But then it just, disappeared. Sean Christensen, ends up making a short that gets an Academy Award. He turns that around into a feature film called Before I Disappear in 2014. And then the Sidney Hall project has just not seen any development. And so he basically opts to have this thing independently produced. And if you look, so the writer, director, and the main star, Logan Lerman, are like the producers on this. And to me, that just, reeks of passion project. They're both really passionate about that. I just wonder about, do you then have the objectivity to say, are we really doing what's right by this? Or do you not have somebody that's looking outside saying, here's maybe some other choices that should be made in how you do this? I just felt like these two guys were maybe too close to the story.
Well, what would you change?
Like I said, there's some things that I don't know if it's cliche, if it's, like I said, it's the structure. There's just some things I thought, I agree. It does what it does well. It looks good. The performances I like. There's just something that feels hollow about this, or it's too written. The character of Melody, Elle Fanning, across the street, who's the neighbor that was there when he was in first grade, and then she moves away and she comes back, and it's just like the too perfect relationship. They're these teens and they're going to run off, and they're the idealistic youth, and then as they get older they grow apart. It just felt like it checked all the boxes too perfectly. Rather than giving me what I expected in a new way, it just gave me what I expected. Sure. And again, this is a film this is why I think it would make a great young adult novel. If I was between 13 and 17 coming to this, this does everything that it should do. But for me, as a more experienced film viewer and reader, I just it's been done and better. Yeah, I guess it just feels like a hollow echo of other things. And I can't blame any of the performances. I think, Logan Lerman as Sidney Hall, Elle Fanning as Melody, Kyle Chandler as the searcher, Michelle Monaghan as the mom. No, great. There's just choices like, okay, Michelle Monaghan plays his mom, and her name is Valoria, which is a Pixies song, and there's some Pixies music in there. I thought, why are you picking that name? There's nobody named Valoria. It just feels, again,
I totally didn't even notice that was her name.
Because it's the opening monologue as he's talking about the girl Valoria, which is his mom, is the cheerleader.
Right.
All of that.
Now I remember.
So it's just it's things like that. But I mean, Nathan Lane is, they're great performance. Tim Blake Nelson. I love Tim Blake Nelson. I think, as the carnival Carney that also, forges documents. Yes, everybody does what they need to do and they do it well, but it just doesn't come together, and it just feels hollow for me, or I feel manipulated. Even at the end, as these things happen, I just felt like I can feel like, oh, we need to get to this point, so I'm going to push things this way.
So did you know that the stuff, did you guess that this was how things were going to go? I mean, that's the thing. I guess manipulated.
Not specifically.
Maybe not, because now, I keep comparing it to Trailer Rewind movies, right? So I think about The Bachelors, and The Bachelors had some real, sledgehammer emotional, we're going to move you this direction with this particular set piece, and that I always felt like it was too much. This stuff in this movie, all of this surprised me. I mean, the big MacGuffin of the hidden tape, which felt like something out of To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, all this stuff, I didn't get that that's what was going to happen in all of the twists and turns of the story. And so that, while I understand how you may have felt manipulated, it was surprising to me. The mystery was enough for me. I bought in.
I think if we're going to get into the end a little bit here.
Sure.
What was in the MacGuffin in the little lunchbox? I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but I knew clearly it had to do with Brett Newport. There was something with his dad, because they set that up enough where, as they're on their way to get that, he's like, everything's going to change tomorrow. You know who my dad is? Oh yeah, he's a judge. I thought, okay, there's something. Judge is corrupt. I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I didn't suspect, that it's,
child rape.
Yes.
You didn't
see that
imagine that was what was going to happen. Yeah.
No. But then, so we've got that, timeline where it's the reveal of what's this incident that's going to be the inspiration for this book. But then we get the scene with Melody in the elevator. And to me, that it didn't ring true.
Okay.
for me on that one. And then I guess part of my issues are there's information that's just hidden from the viewer for no good reason other than to reveal it at the end. Like all along, he's seen these people, he's seen the doctor, mental illness, what's going on. Later on, when he's, the recluse and he goes in the hospital, it's like, oh, he's got, brain damage, possible, concussion or something like that. Then we now see it's in this confrontation with his mom. And I thought, okay, he gets a head wound as he's still in high school, so we're like 10 years later. There's at no point that this has manifested itself before, or he's, as a famous author, he's never gone to see a doctor about, hey, when I was 17, I had this severe head injury and I'm seeing people. It just felt like being used for specific plot purposes rather than this is how these characters would behave, I guess.
I think that's fair. For me, I bought into it. I mean, the things that we experienced in The Bachelor when there's the mental breakdown that leads to shock therapy and all that stuff, that I guess maybe even coming off that experience, that's 2 months ago, but it coming off that experience, this at least felt like it was rooted in something that could take place, or at least could take place in the course of a film, right? So that's and that's where I was in with it. But and the releasing that stuff, that's where the nonlinear storytelling made me more appreciate. I mean, they seemed to work together in that those things that they were hiding, or the things that they were the causes for the drama that you're feeling throughout the film while he's dealing with mental illness or the seeing of people, the injury. It tells the story. It reveals it at the end or towards the climax, which I think it's appropriate storytelling. I think I liked that ride, that we were learning about what caused this stuff at the end of the experience of it, which I thought was very, very, very creative to do from a storytelling way in film.
And I want to come back to what I think is a strength in this. The setup early on of the introduction of the character of the searcher.
Yes,
Chandler.
Of course.
That to me was, I think, the strong part in the beginning of, we have this reclusive writer and we've got somebody that's trying to find him. To me, in the trailer, that's what drew me in. That's the title of the film, The Vanishing of Sidney Hall. I'm a big fan of these like procedural type things of like, there's a mystery to be solved. We're trying to find somebody. I wanted more of that because I was really intrigued. And there was a moment when I think this is sort of in our mid storyline. It's like Sidney has been nominated for the Pulitzer, and he's talking with the daughter of his publisher, who's having an affair with, and he talks about, he has these dreams that there's somebody following him.
Right.
Which I thought, okay, is this storyline of the searcher and the recluse, is that in his mind, is that going to be his next book? I thought that's an interesting direction, but I really liked the searcher, tracking Sidney across the country and finding people, finding, Tim Blake Nelson, and, tracking all these aliases. For me, that worked really, really well.
I think so too.
I wanted more of that. And then,
did you know who he was?
I was just going to get to that. No, I didn't.
No, and he's credited as the searcher too.
He's credited as the searcher. Right. And we were actually watching, I think, the whole family were watching. I think we had the captions on, and I think it identified him in the captions as the searcher. And we're like, oh, interesting. They're not naming this character the searcher. So, yeah, when we find out who this is, I guess that timeline to me is the most interesting, because the reveal happens in a diner. So Sidney's been arrested for, it was an open container. He's like, he's homeless. He's on the streets. He's got his dog with him, and the police find him and he gets arrested. They take his dog, animal,
right.
Rescue's going to get him. And then he makes bail. And there's this, it's the searcher that's posted bail for him. And he basically proposes a deal to Sidney. He wants Sidney's agreement to the terms of this before. And in that discussion is when we get the reveal.
Mr. Hall, I've been searching for you for the better half of a year. I'm a big fan. I've studied both of your novels, Suburban Tragedy and Stave Execution, and I find them to be extraordinary forms of map work.
Map work, huh? You're a psycho fan, aren't you?
No. Well, I mean, maybe a little. Life isn't very interesting. We're not a bit psychotic.
Look, I'm not a writer anymore. You understand what I'm saying? I don't have any money. There's nothing I can give you.
That's not what interests me. I've come here with the intention of presenting you with a deal. In return for me posting your bail, I would like to ask you a favor. However, I need you to say yes to this favor before I actually tell you exactly what it is.
No way. You have to tell me what it is first.
You're not really in a position to bargain, Mr. Hall. Your propensity of starting fires in public places has you at a disadvantage. But don't worry, what I ask you, it will not take long.
Oh, great. Why'd you have to go and say that? First it was a favor, and now it's a time-consuming favor.
Well, there's nothing to be afraid of. It may even be therapeutic.
Therapeutic? Do you have any idea what kind of fucked up things I'm imagining right now?
Then I suggest you say yes.
Yes, sure. Jesus Christ. Just tell me what it is before I have a heart attack.
I want to write a book about you.
Say again.
I want to write your biography. Your life.
You want to write a book about me?
I would like to write a book about you.
Absolutely not. No.
Yes.
You ever even written anything before?
I know what you've written, and I happen to think you're one of the best writers of our time.
You get ahead of yourself. I'm not. That would be Francis Bishop. Have you ever read Francis Bishop? He won the Pulitzer the year was nominated.
Maybe he didn't deserve it.
No, he deserved it, all right. His follow-up book was proof enough of that. My follow-up was self-indulgent and pretentious. So if you want to write about the greatest writer of our time, I suggest you write about Francis Bishop.
No, I'm no good at autobiographies.
Look, I don't know what to tell you then. You are Francis Bishop?
JJ.
Yeah.
How did you respond to the reveal of who this searcher is?
I loved it because I thought the way that it was written, the story, the dialogue here at the diner was it was clever, and I didn't get it. I mean, they set me up. Kyle Chandler was, the guy. He was the authority. I totally bought it. And I was as blown away as Sidney was. I thought it was great. And I could definitely see you throwing a manipulative dart at this one too, but I just thought it was great. It was not the last thing I expected, but I definitely did not expect it.
Well, I love the way the reveal is sort of in a quick throwaway line because, Sidney's like, oh, you should write about Francis Bishop. Yeah. And he's like, well, I'm not good at writing an autobiography. And then, the conversation continues and we were watching, we're like, wait, what?
See,
he's Francis Bishop. He's the guy that won the
too.
Yes. It was great because
good writing.
Yes, that I agree. That is solid writing because we get this, Francis Bishop is this, it's this other writer. It's the rival. It's the one, when Sidney gets nominated for a Pulitzer, it's, he's like reading Francis Bishop, who's also been nominated. He's like, wow, this guy is good. So there's this respect there from Sidney. And then I'm all on board with that with, this searcher, and he reveals he's Francis Bishop. And then I'm thinking, why is he tracking Sidney Hall?
Right.
Why, what is it? And then they start to lose me again because it's like, oh, it's his son. And his son was being distant and there had been some trauma or whatever. And his son read Sidney's book. And it was only after reading that book that his son was able to talk with him again. And I thought, oh, really? It's just one thing too far. If it had just been Sidney, writing, that mutual respect between writers of you do something different and I could never do what you do, and I really understand what you're doing and appreciate that would have been enough for me. But to tie it into, Francis's own kid and all that, it just again became this, I don't know, a little too melodramatic for me.
That's fair. I just liked it. I mean, honestly, I feel like it pairs extremely well with the story of Sidney, and this is again my interpretation, but not having the imposter syndrome idea of not deserving the acclaim and the respect that he got, and then of course ruining his marriage through infidelity, and then dealing with this mental illness, the whole thing. So this is Sidney's journey. So what you have is Francis, who actually wins the Pulitzer, and then his son goes through this terrible patch, and then the book that he beat in this Pulitzer is the one that saves his son. So of course he wants to tap that inspiration. He wants to know why Sidney only wrote 2 novels. He wants to know why he's gone. He deserves more than he was given. So you have now this imposter syndrome of the man who won the Pulitzer. I think your feelings are warranted about it, but this is something that I just thought was a smart way to put the story together, and I liked it a lot.
Okay, well, we can, as I say, we can always agree to disagree.
Well, so the basis of Trailer Rewind. Is there a person that you think, because people ask me about this show all the time, they say, you do something about streaming. So what is a movie that I might have missed that I should check out on streaming? And this fits into that character for me. I mean, this is not Miss Sloan, but this is the kind of thing where I'm going to say, people should check this movie out because it's got some creative twists and turns. Who, even though you feel manipulated, are there people that you think you could recommend this to?
Yeah, I can. I think, I feel like we're on the backside of like the conversation we had about The Bachelors, where my daughter and I had a really strong emotional reaction to that. Yeah. And so I think these films are sort of a pair that, depending on where you are or expectation, like I said, I think the young adult audience, I think, will really connect with this. I think teens will,
those people that are susceptible to manipulation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, a little bit. But I think, that idea of people that are perhaps the outcasts in high school, but are the creative types, and to see, this can be that hero of, he's going to show up everybody, right? He's going to get out of this small town. He's going to get the big, check advance for his novel and get away from the dynamics at home, which I still am not clear about. Dad's disability, I don't know what's going on with Dad. That was just a big question I had.
That was never explained. Yeah, what's
going on with that? Was it a work-related incident? What happened? I have no idea. I didn't, because it's like there's sometimes where Dad's just sitting there and he's like mute. And I'm like, oh, is Dad, something happened? Was he in a car accident, brain damage? But then there's other times where he's seems to be,
relatively
talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I think, I don't know if my oldest daughter has seen it yet, but this is, we tease her a lot because she likes what we call her stories. She likes those, TV dramas. It's just a little bit melodramatic to me. This is the perfect thing for her. It's got a little love story to it. Yeah. That it didn't do anything new for me. A tragic love story. There's, I didn't fall in love with that relationship, and I felt like it was trying to set me up to do that between, Sidney and Melody. This should be, they get each other because they don't fit in, and I didn't fall in love with them. So for me, the tragedy of them, as adults, separating didn't hit me like I felt that it should, because I thought these two that they're escaping together, right? And I should love that idea. And they set this goal of like, on May 25th, when we turn, 30 or whatever, we're going to meet at this place no matter what. And
you didn't like that.
I wanted to love it more. Just something prevented me from really going down that road with them. So I think again, I'm older and maybe more cynical, and but I think there's people that will love this movie. And in looking at the reviews on IMDb, a lot of people say, this is, they said, don't listen to the critics. This is a great story. It's like a great book. You're going to love these characters and all that. And I think, as I said, I think I would have enjoyed this more as a novel where I would have had more time with these characters. I could have gotten to know them deeper. And I feel like that's the one thing is with the fragmented timeline, I don't have that time to grow and connect with them in the same way.
You're definitely right in that it feels like a novel. And I will just say, to back up what you're saying there at the end, that, I started off this show with the fact that Tommy Handsome told me that, Rotten Tomatoes was 12%, Metacritic was an 18%. But if you just do a little bit more looking, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 80%. So that's why, I mentioned this is going to be one of them that's closer to the top for me in saying, this is a streaming movie that you probably missed. And if you like nonlinear drama, there's a chance you're going to like this movie. I think all your points are fair. I would definitely understand someone who doesn't want to be manipulated or made to feel like they're easy to push in a certain direction by watching this movie. But the reality is that this movie will surprise you in one way or another if you watch it.
Yeah, it's going to divide audiences one way. There's people that are going to love this. There's people that are going to be perhaps indifferent or disappointed.
Sure.
So that brings us to our, where'd you rank it? How many stars did you give it? So where does this one end up for you? I'm really curious.
It's going to sound really strange. I actually had to rank it a couple times because I didn't really get where it was showing up on my flick chart. So I had a couple debates with myself and redid it and all that bit. It comes in at, I think, number here. Let me see. It's 78 out of 197. So what that means, the funny thing is that where it comes in is between When Harry Met Sally. So below When Harry Met Sally.
Wow.
And above Caddyshack. So there's really no basis for understanding why it would drop in that little book, because there's no possible way for you to catch a parallel to these comedies, this wacky romantic comedy and the totally absurd Caddyshack, which again I think are great comedies, but this movie's not a comedy. It just falls right there in there for me. And at 78, it's supposed to be a 3-star thing for me on Flickchart or on my rankings. It's about a 3.5 or a 4 to me. It's right at the bottom there. I enjoyed it that much. I think it's special in a way that people won't necessarily know. How about for you?
Take that and go the opposite direction.
I will.
Okay, so
just wait. Is it above or below The Bachelors? First of all, do you? And is that?
Oh, it's below The Bachelors.
It's below The Bachelors. Wow.
But I ranked The Bachelor. I really liked The Bachelors, as you recall. I had my daughter. I had a real strong emotional, tears. So it is near another trailer rewind film.
Okay.
Do you remember? I don't know. Sometime, I believe it was last year, we talked about a little movie called 999.
Is it below 999 for you?
It's just below 999. It's actually 358 out of 360. I'm giving it 2 stars.
Okay.
It should, Flickchart says I should rank it worse. I have to really hate a movie to say 1 star.
Right.
And I say 2 stars. I think the performances are good. I think there's, like I said, there's story issues, but the performances, I think it's a well shot movie. I think there's some, we didn't get into cinematography at all, but there's
some great stuff in there.
There's some there's nice stuff in here. I said this movie deserves to be better, and that's through
nice way to say it.
Failings of my own, perhaps, but that's where I put it, and it's just not for me. But I know there are people that are going to love this, and I think it's a story that's going to resonate with people. It's got those moments. It's got that potential. So I just have to say, not for me as where I am in my life.
Okay.
But I think there is definitely an audience for this. And I think it's a shame that it didn't, it feels like it just got pushed and dumped out there.
It does feel like that for sure.
But I think, Amazon Prime, Canopy, this is one that, hopefully finds its audience over time. It's been a year. I think, you give it 5 years, you're going to get little cult followings for this movie, and I think it's got the cast to draw people to it, because people say, "Oh, I recognize Logan Lerman. He's an actor. I remember Elle Fanning. People recognize these faces." So I think that will hopefully be a draw, as opposed to a film that's of unknowns, that's driving and is going to fail to break through barriers because of the lack of recognizable faces. But this is full of familiar faces that I think people say, well, yeah, this must be a real movie because it's got actors I recognize, and I'm going to give it a shot.
It'll give them a chance. That's good.
If you haven't already, please head over to iTunes and give us a rating and review. It helps other film fans discover us. And if you choose to support us on Patreon, you're joining a great community of film fans, including some that are really into film as art.
Yes.
Such as this film, perhaps. Some that just really enjoy movies.
Yep.
But we'd love to have you join our community. Over on Discord, there's a lot of good conversations that are popping up. It's hard for me to even keep track of everything going on. There's been a lot of discussion about the Criterion Channel. I just started my delving into that this week as just one more option in streaming services.
You have a bunch right now.
It's far too many, but it's so enjoyable over there. So lots of discussion about that, and particularly with some of our international members on Discord who are not able to access things like that. So there's always a discussion about what's going on. Why can't we just get access to movies? Why can't we that love movies, somebody just please let me watch these movies? I will pay you. Take my money. I want to watch these movies. Nope. No options for you if you're in Australia. So I want to send a special thanks to Pete Wright for editing this together, putting in those audio clips to make us sound like we're like a real show. Thank you, Pete, for doing that. And JJ, always a pleasure.
See you next time.
Hondo.